Now imagine that same flight tearing itself apart in midair, slamming into the tallest mountains in South America, and leaving you stranded nearly 12,000 feet above sea level, with no food, no rescue, and no idea if the world even knows you're alive. 45 people went up into the Andes Mountains that day. Most of the world assumed they were dead within a week. Newspapers literally printed their obituaries. Rescue teams stopped looking. Families mourned. But here's the insane part. 16 of them refused to die. They survived freezing temperatures that could kill you overnight. They survived injuries that should have ended them instantly. They survived starvation so extreme it forced them to make an unthinkable decision, one that still shocks people to this day. And 2 of them did something no one believed was possible. With no gear, no maps, no training, and barely any food, they walked straight into the heart of the Andes and somehow came out alive. This isn't just a plane crash story. This is a story about the absolute limits of human survival and what happens when hope refuses to quit. So let's rewind to how this nightmare actually began, because nothing about it felt dangerous at first. On October 12, 1972, a small chartered aircraft lifted off from Uruguay, heading towards Santiago, Chile. On board were 45 people, mostly young rugby players, tall, athletic, full of life, along with a few family members and friends who had tagged along for the trip. The vibe was light. This was supposed to be an easy flight. 3 hours in the air, that's it. Short enough that nobody even thought twice about it. But there was one unavoidable obstacle in their path: the Andes Mountains. These aren't just any mountains. This is the longest mountain range in the world, with peaks so massive they rival the Himalayas. Beautiful to look at, absolutely unforgiving if something goes wrong. And that day, something did go wrong. A powerful storm rolled into the mountains, forcing the pilots to make a cautious decision. They landed in Mendoza, Argentina, planning to wait it out and continue the next day. On October 13th at 2:18 p.m., the plane took off again. The pilots believed the weather had cleared. For nearly an hour, everything felt normal. Smooth flying, calm skies, passengers relaxed. Some joked around. No one had any reason to panic. Then at 3:21 p.m., the pilots began descending towards Santiago. The city was close, but the mountains were still right there, towering beside them. That's when things went completely sideways. The plane hit violent turbulence, shaking hard from side to side. Thick clouds swallowed everything outside the windows. Alarms suddenly blared in the cockpit. Warning lights flashed. Confusion spread fast. The rugby players still didn't think it was serious until one passenger looked out and realized something was very, very wrong. The clouds were clearing, and a mountain was right there. As the aircraft burst out of the cloud cover, the pilots saw it too, a massive rock wall dead ahead. They slammed the engines to full power, desperately trying to climb. The ground collision alarm screamed. For a few terrifying seconds, it almost felt like they might clear it. Almost. But then the rear of the plane slammed into the mountain. The entire tail ripped away. 2 rows of seats were torn out and hurled into open air, along with 3 passengers who vanished instantly. The plane lurched upward briefly, then gravity took over. Seconds later, the left wing shattered. More people were thrown out into nothingness. What remained, the front section, hurtled down onto a glacier at nearly 220 miles per hour, sliding hundreds of meters before finally slamming to a stop. In that moment, everything ended, and everything began. Because somehow, against all logic, this wasn't the end of the story. But here's where it gets truly unreal. What happened immediately after the crash changed everything. When the wreck finally came to a stop, silence fell over the glacier, thick, eerie, and unreal. The cockpit was completely crushed. Both pilots were killed instantly. Seats were ripped from the floor, twisted like paper. Luggage, metal, and bodies were scattered across the snow. By every rule of aviation, no one should have survived a crash like this at nearly 12,000 feet. And yet, when the dust settled, 33 people were still alive. Many of them were badly injured, broken legs, crushed ribs, deep cuts, internal injuries, and they had no idea where they were. No map, no signal, just endless white mountains in every direction. Later, investigators would discover the plane had crashed almost 80 kilometers off its planned route, far deeper into the Andes than anyone realized. Among the survivors were two young medical students, 19-year-old Roberto Canessa and 20-year-old Gustavo Zerbino. While others were still in shock, these two immediately went into action. They checked pulses, they stabilized fractures, they tried to stop bleeding using torn clothing and seat fabric. There was no panic in their movements, just urgency. One of the most critical patients was 23-year-old Fernando Parrado. He had suffered a severe skull fracture and was lying unconscious in a coma. No one knew if he'd ever wake up. Around him, survivors did whatever they could to help each other, even while fighting pain and fear themselves. Within an hour of the plane's disappearance, search and rescue teams in Chile were alerted. Aircraft were launched. Crews scanned the Andes from the sky until nightfall, but they saw nothing. The problem was brutal and simple. The wreckage was white, buried in snow, surrounded by ice. From above, it was invisible. That first night, the survivors were still hopeful. They believed rescue would come quickly. All they had to do was survive until morning. But the cold was vicious. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. 5 injured passengers didn't make it through the night. By dawn, the number of survivors dropped from 33 to 28. Those who remained used the broken fuselage as shelter. They sealed the open rear of the plane with luggage, seats, and packed snow to trap heat inside. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't safe, but it was the only thing standing between them and death. The next day, they watched in disbelief as search planes flew directly overhead, once, twice, even 3 times. They screamed, they waved, they tried to signal using suitcases and messages written with lipstick. Nothing worked. The aircraft never saw them. And in that moment, hope began to crack. Because being alive was one thing, but being found was something else entirely. And what they realized next would push them into an even darker phase of survival. By the 3rd day, reality started to sink in hard. Survival wasn't just about waiting anymore, it was about adapting fast. Water became the first critical problem. Snow was everywhere, but eating it directly would drop their temperatures even further. That's when Fido Strout came up with a simple but life-saving idea. Using a piece of metal from the wreckage, he created a makeshift solar collector. Sunlight hit the metal, snow melted, and droplets of water were collected in empty wine bottles. It wasn't much, but it kept them alive. They got creative in other ways too. Seat cushions became snowshoes. Wool from seat covers was used as insulation. Anything that could trap heat mattered. Most of them had never even seen snow before this trip. Now they were surviving in temperatures that dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius, at an altitude where breathing itself felt like work. On the 4th day, something emotional and devastating happened. Fernando Parrado woke up from his coma. At first, that felt like a miracle, but within hours, reality hit him like a punch to the chest. His mother had died in the crash. His younger sister, just 19, was alive, but badly injured. Parrado refused to leave her side. He brought her water, he shared his tiny food rations, he did everything he could to keep her alive. 8 days after the crash, she died. By then, the survivors were also facing another invisible enemy, snow blindness. The sun's ultraviolet rays reflected on the snow, burning their eyes. They only had 3 pairs of sunglasses to share between everyone. People took turns wearing them, squinting through pain just to function. Then, on October 21st, 8 days after the crash, the final blow landed. Through a small transistor radio they had managed to fix, the survivors heard the words that crushed what little hope they had left. The search operation had been officially called off. After 142 hours, rescue teams had given up. The world believed they were dead. Some survivors cried, some prayed, some completely shut down. But Fernando Parrado didn't panic, he didn't scream, he didn't collapse. Instead, he started planning. Because if no one was coming to save them, then surviving meant doing the unthinkable and doing it themselves. And what they were about to face next would test not just their strength, but their humanity. By the 11th day, food was no longer running low, it was gone. From the beginning, their supplies had been painfully small: 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, a few jars of jam, almonds, peanuts, some dried fruit, candies, and a few bottles of wine. They rationed everything down to crumbs. Parado once survived 3 days on a single chocolate-covered peanut, just one. But now there was nothing left to ration. At nearly 12,000 feet, there were no trees, no plants, no animals, nothing edible. Desperation pushed them to try the impossible. They chewed on cotton from the seats. They scraped leather from cushions. It only made them weaker and sicker. Starvation was no longer a future threat. It was happening in real time.